Welcome back in, everybody, to a Football Friday edition of Birds 365. Joined now by Thomas Mott, host of the Thomas Mott Show on YouTube. Thomas, welcome to the show, man. Eagles are going to get back on track this week, right, Thomas? Oh, you're muted, Thomas.
That's a bad start to the Eagles Football Friday, but we're back now. There we go. Listen, guys, I mean, a bye week does wonders for getting your confidence back in a football team, and yet they could easily go out and lay an egg, but I don't know. You guys feel pretty good. I feel pretty confident. You get the Browns, and I feel like we heard the right things from the Eagles in terms of the media and the changes on defense this week, and I'm pretty pumped.
Yeah, and I do think that the Browns are so injured, but it starts with Deshaun Watson and just how poorly he's playing. And I think that's part of Nick Sirianni's messaging this week was, stay humble. That stood out to me because I think so many people are looking at this game, Thomas, and saying, all right, this is a gimme. And if you do that in the NFL, Zander brought up the phrase trap game, which everyone's heard in the past. It can be a trap game, but only if you walk in that mentality of, oh, this is a gimme, which generally doesn't happen in the NFL. So that should be pretty easy. It's a good matchup. They should win the game. Will they win the game? That's the key. And a lot of things would have to go wrong for them to lose this game. But number one, the easiest way to fall into a trap, Thomas, is turnovers.
Yeah.
So can Jalen Hurts stop the turnovers? You've seen them all individually, contextually. A lot are his fault. A lot aren't his fault. What do you make of it? Because this is a long, extended period of time that this quarterback has turned the football over pretty consistently.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned trap games and upsets and how these things can actually happen. And obviously turnovers are a big way. Myles Garrett could single-handedly wreck the Eagles' party coming after a bye, right? First drive, Myles Garrett strip sack. Browns, 1st and 10 from the Eagle 15. They go and score. It's 7-0, and then we're all panicking again. So you're very right. I mean, it could definitely be a trap game, even though I think most Eagle fans would take this one as maybe your first opportunity to get a double-digit win in what feels like 4 or 5 years. Our last time we got a comfortable fourth-quarter lead feels like forever. But Hurts' turnovers are obviously, a major problem. And it's just amazing that they continue to be a fact of every single game that he plays. They're just, every single game you expect, okay, he's going to get strip sacked. He's going to hold the ball too long. He's going to throw it right to the defender. And it's getting very, very old. And you just wonder, what can they do to help him out? And I wonder if they can maybe game plan a little bit better early on, maybe not have so many longer dropbacks where he's sitting back in the pocket for 4 or 5 seconds trying to work the football down the field, start a little slower in the beginning, work in some quick slants to A.J. Brown being back. That should help on the football a lot more early on, get Hurts a little bit more comfortable. And then if they can just get a lead, then maybe he's not going to be pressing as much as he's had been, especially later in these football games, the strip sack against the Bucks, the later throws in some of those Saints games. Hopefully he can get back on track. But I think overall, this football team just needs a completely clean win, a win where there are no turnovers. They don't give up multiple sacks. They get sacks on defense. They force turnovers on defense, and they win, like we just mentioned, by 10, 14, 21 points and kind of sit back and go, okay, we can do this multiple times. We don't have to be in a dogfight every single week. We can play clean football, and that's going to get a lot of fans, I think, buying back into the 2024 Eagles.
Thomas, I'm just looking for a W. If it's 21-20, I'll take it. But I know everybody's looking for that double-digit win. Thomas, I want to go to the defensive side of the ball because, it's easy to say the offense is going to get better. You're getting back Lane Johnson, Devontae Smith, and A.J. Brown. They're going to get better. Those are the 3 best players in the team. Defense is a different story. Now, Deshaun Watson coming into this game, he's been sacked 26 times in 5 games, averaging over 5 sacks a game for him. Is this an opportunity for the Eagles' edge rushers, for Bryce Huff, to kind of get going in this football game?
I think I said it during, I think it was the Bucks matchup and the Saints matchup was like, okay, these are favorable for the defensive line. The Bucks had some injuries going into that game. They should be able to get after Baker Mayfield because the Broncos did just that a week prior, and then we didn't do anything with Baker Mayfield. So I am cautiously optimistic that Bryce Huff gets going. I just want to see the defensive line just look relevant, right? I think I've talked a lot about on my show how the defense doesn't have to be a top 5 defense this year. They don't have to be top 10. just be middle of the pack. They could be the 17th rated overall defense in every single major category, and they're going to win a bunch of games with a healthy A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley, Devontae Smith in the offensive line. But they're towards the bottom in almost every single major statistical category that really matters, especially pass rush, getting to the quarterback, producing sacks. And guys, if they can't do it this week, if Bryce Huff continues to lay basically a statistical egg, I mean, he's had one tackle, which was a pretty easy tackle overall last week. If he continues to struggle, then I think you got to give more reps to Jalix Hunt. You got to play Nolan Smith more. Not that they're somehow going to be that much better, but regardless of $17 million a year, if he can't do anything on the football field against the Cleveland Browns offensive line and Deshaun Watson, then I think the snap count continues to go down and other guys get some more opportunities.
Boy, I'm concerned. Jedrick Wills was back last week. I think they're hoping to get Wills and Jack Conklin back this week. And then all of a sudden, I mean, the Browns, when they're healthy, have one of the best offensive lines in football. Wyatt Teller's out on injured reserve, so you don't have to worry about that inside. But the tackles might be back. And then I think, I don't want to say poor Bryce Huff, but I do think a lot of things have not gone that guy's direction so far, and he's losing confidence week by week by week. And I think everybody looks at Cleveland and says, oh, this is the time to get healthy. And all of a sudden, Wills and Conklin show up, and you're like, it's not the time to get healthy. I bring this up, Thomas, because a bunch of the Jets reporters and Rich Cimini, and I know a bunch of those guys, they all think he can play.
Yeah.
They all think he can play. And they're saying the Jets made a mistake and should have brought him back because they're dealing with the Hassan Reddick issue. So they all saw him play. They all think that he can play. How much of this is on the Eagles for misevaluating the fit?
It's so hard to know. And I'm not an X's and O's guy. I say that on my show all the time. There are way better people to watch if you want to get actual film breakdown than watching my show. But I've watched a lot of those guys try and break down Bryce Huff. I think Josh Davis did a great job on his channel. You guys are going to have him on about an hour from now, I think about a week ago. And a lot of those Bryce Huff sacks came on very clear passing downs late in a football game where maybe the offensive line was a little bit tired after a long drive, or the Jets were already up, and so you knew that they were throwing. And so his whole argument was, maybe the numbers were a little bit overblown based on what the Jets were able to do defensively, being a great defensive team as well in 2023, which, again, I buy into. But this whole idea that Bryce Huff just suddenly can't rush the passer, and it's not like he's getting close, and like his arm is kind of almost getting to the quarterback, and then quarterback steps up and throws a touchdown pass. He's not getting close. He's not winning hardly at all. I mean, you can count on one hand the amount of reps you've watched with Bryce Huff where it's like, wow, I think he actually got around the tackle. He got close to the quarterback. It virtually doesn't exist. And so whether it's, his confidence, whether it's Vic Fangio's scheme, I saw a whole thing on, well, he needs to have two hands on the ground and be a true pass rusher versus this kind of hybrid outside linebacker edge guy, whether it's because he can't, defend against the run. So he's worried about getting beat there and not focusing on pass. I don't know, right? I genuinely don't know. All I know is that you paid him $17 million a year, and to be this big of a bust is really surprising. Like, the Eagles have had free agent busts in the past, John. Like, you obviously know this. You covered the team.
Yeah.
You're out the ups and downs of Howie Roseman's tenure. They've missed on plenty of players. But this feels like one of the biggest ones because he's not average. He's not below average. He's basically non-existent right now. So I think confidence would go a big way. I think getting a sack would go a massive, massive way. Hear the roar of the Eagle crowd with a big finally at the link if he can do it. But I don't have any confidence because he's shown me absolutely nothing over the first 4.5, now going into 5 weeks with the Philadelphia Eagles. And again, I think you got to try some other people out there, which includes Jalix Hunt, who only got 5 snaps total so far on defense, and maybe more Nolan Smith, but Nolan's not been that impressive. Overall, the defensive line, I think, is just not that good.
Yeah, and I've been starting to wonder, Thomas, how much of this should we be putting on Howie Roseman? And we're talking about probably one of the greatest, people disputed this, but maybe the greatest collection of offensive talent the Eagles have ever had. When you talk about wide receiver, Saquon, offensive line, people push back and say, well, Jalen's not all that. So however, take it however you want to will. They spent almost $200 million on the offense.
Yeah.
We have 4 first-round picks on the defense. We got 2 third-round picks on the defense. You got, did Howie just, I mean, this is a big miss. If Howie didn't do anything right on that defensive side of the ball and they can't get to the middle of the pack, like you said, what a blunder that would be. Now, do you blame Howie? Or we had John Stonis on yesterday who said, well, they're not developing talent. You know, that's the other line of thinking. Where are you on Howie in this season and what he did in the offseason?
Well, I think before this season, kind of under the impression, well, they're just, Howie's had some misses. And so here's a couple of misses mixed in, but he also has plenty of positives, right? Jordan Mailata, they developed him well. But then to the whole development side, I saw a stat like 20 minutes ago while I was browsing Twitter before coming on y'all's show, and it was showing I think, overall rankings. It might have been PFF, I can't remember, of all the safeties in the National Football League, right? Gardner Johnson, obviously a free agent addition, pretty far down. Blankenship a little bit higher up. And then Kevin Byard, who all of us were like, Kevin Byard is totally washed. What another miss at the trade deadline. Obviously, Philadelphia last year. He was on the other end of the spectrum and is one of the top safeties in the National Football League right now for the Chicago Bears. And you go, how is that possible? We all watched Kevin Byard last year, and Kevin Byard was really bad. He was honestly terrible after the trade deadline. And yet you sit back and go, well, once these people are leaving, they're playing much better. And so I think it's a mixture of Howie missing, a mixture of the scheme maybe not fitting, which is very weird because I'm sure they asked Vic Fangio, do you want Bryce Huff? Do you want, Gardner Johnson? He said yes. And then also, not being able to develop players. But we are looking at a list of players between the draft picks that you mentioned, the free agent additions this past year, where just kind of waiting on the hit, right? Where is the defensive hit? Jalen Carter is the only option that comes to mind. But the problem is Quinyon. There you go. Yes, yeah. Quinyon. But in terms of the past couple of years prior to last year's draft, Jalen Carter is the only one that you can look to as a hit, and he's been very sporadic, right? He doesn't appear really in the Bucs game. Can you think of a play where Jalen Carter was like, oh, there he is, disrupting this whole entire game? He was much better in the Saints game a couple of weeks ago. But besides him, I mean, the whole idea of not taking Kyle Hamilton and drafting Jordan Davis looking like one of the generational misses for Howie Roseman. And we can rip Howie all we want. He still is one of the best GMs in the league. You still, as Zander mentioned, have A.J. Brown. You have Saquon Barkley this year. You hit on Quinyon Mitchell. He has obviously a massive upside. But a lot of these defensive misses are going to come back to bite Philadelphia. And you're going to have to live with it, I guess, because we have no other options going forward this year.
I'm going to go at Howie in a different way. And I've been pretty consistent with this. And this is difficult for me because I love Vic Fangio personally. Yeah. But yeah, I think the scheme has passed I think the NFL has passed the scheme by. I do. You mentioned Kevin Byard. Yeah, he's number 3 in the NFL, by the way, Thomas.
It's crazy.
From PFF. By the way, number 1 is Xavier McKinney, who the Eagles wanted to sign.
Yep.
Couldn't sign, got a little bit too expensive. And they went the CJ Gardner Johnson route, who has not played well. I mentioned it a little bit with Huff. Kyle Hamilton's an interesting name because Zander could tell you, boy, Jody and I never stopped talking about him as a player, but I would often say, but he's not a fit here.
Right.
Like if you get Kyle Hamilton in Baltimore, you think he's going to play like that here. No, he's not. He's going to be in a cover 2 shell before the snap, and you're not taking advantage of what he does well.
Right.
And you're spinning off into coverage. I'm worried. It happened to Tony Dungy. It happened to Pete Carroll. It's happened to Vic Fangio. And the Eagles, who like to regard themselves as being ahead of the curve, they're behind the curve on this one. And this is the 4th year of this scheme. And it's the same issues. It's Gannon. It's Sean Desai. I don't even count Matt Patricia. I don't know what that was. And now it's Vic Fangio, the author, the guy who's so well respected. Well, he'll fix things. Well, guess what? It looks exactly the same. People talk about the offense looking the same. No. The defense looks exactly the same, but they don't have the talent and they don't have the 70 sacks, which are, not making up for the deficiencies in the coverage. Is it time to say, we got to change the scheme up? Can't do it now, by the way.
Right.
But
right. No, I think it's a very solid point. I think the whole problem is that all of us kind of bought into this idea that if you just had the godfather of the scheme, then the scheme could actually work. And I was one this offseason who was like, okay, imagine taking Sean Asai, who seemingly had some leadership issues. He wasn't kind of the big man on campus and everything went crazy in the locker room last year. Imagine having a scheme that is actually developed by the actual guy. And then you get this no nonsense, no BS kind of, older coach in the National Football League who's going to get the most out of these young players and, get them in the right direction. That was my whole selling point of Vic Fangio. I was like, yes, that's exactly what we need. We need an adult in the room, no BS. I loved all his press conferences during training camp where he's just telling you as it is. Bryce Huff's not ready. Hopefully get him ready. I don't know. And yet, you mentioned it, it's not been good. I mean, besides the Saints game, really, the Eagles defense has absolutely been gashed. And I think it looks a little bit different than last year in the way that they're being beat, but overall, they get absolutely no pressure, and teams are able to just carve them up down the football field. And now I'm hoping that a couple of the moves that they have made is going to be able to tick the old clock in their direction at least a little bit. I think Avonte Maddox was an absolute liability in coverage, but also was bad at tackling. And so you can put DeJean in there who, let's say he's the same in coverage. He at least can tackle better at the line of scrimmage, tackle better in the box, and be more of a run stopper at a nickel position, which is a weird thing to say, but he's still going to be closer to the line of scrimmage and hopefully be able to go ahead and tackle better than Maddox did because he was awful in that Bucs game. But I think you also got to look yourself in the mirror if you're Vic Fangio and go, okay, we're not playing press coverage basically at all. They're like the lowest press coverage football team in the entire National Football League. Like 85% of their snaps, they're playing 7, 8, 10 yards back. And we've been, complaining about this as Eagle fans forever. 3rd down and 2, and Darius Slay's 8 yards off the football, and you're like, what are we doing here? And so my hope is, not saying it's going to happen, I think you guys would agree, is that this past week, we believe what Nick Sirianni said, that they took a big, long, hard look in the mirror. I saw all of their deficiencies, all of the problems that are going on, and they've made some adjustments. And I'm just absolutely hoping, the fan in me is hoping, we come out on Sunday afternoon versus the Browns, and the defense plays well. The offense is a lot more fluid. They don't, kind of have drives where they get away from Saquon Barkley and then they don't use motion. It just kind of looks the way it's supposed to, and they get this team back on track. Because all of that being said, guys, this is still a really good football team on paper, right? If they can start to go on a little bit of a run here and find their groove and gain that confidence, I mean, the rest of the NFC is basically the Vikings, the Lions, and then the Commanders, right? And the idea that Commanders are going to be this world-beating Super Bowl caliber team this year, I think is a little bit far-fetched. And so if they can just figure things out, big if, I think they can start to maybe, look a lot better than their record is showing, because on paper, the resume or the roster, it should be good enough, scheme being bad or not, to win you a lot of football games.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best thing going for the Eagles right now is the NFC is wide open. The Commanders look great, but we got to see it for a full year. The Vikings, they just don't scare me. I know they're 5-0, but we'll see how they fare through the rest of the year. So I think that is the best thing. Thomas, I want to ask you what your thoughts are on Jalen Hurts' press conference the other day. He spoke about great moments repeatedly with Nick Sirianni. Harmony. That's where I was going. He spoke about harmony. Did that come off like intentional to you? He almost like went there with Nick's name on a very vague question from our man Ed Kratz. What were your thoughts on that? And what do you think about the relationship between the coach and the quarterback, at least from the outside perspective?
Well, I think that the Jets proved this past week that if your head coach and your quarterback don't see eye to eye, regardless of what both of them were saying in terms of no, we like each other, you're not going anywhere fast. And so my hope is that the relationship between Sirianni and Hurts is strong or fixed. Maybe could be the word. I really don't know. These guys get media coaching, John. Obviously in the National Football League, they got a plenty of PR people in Philadelphia, plenty of Eagle comm guys who are maybe saying, hey, it'd be really good if you went out there and said some nice things about Sirianni. Yeah. The fans would love it. And honestly, I did. Like when I heard it, it was like, oh yeah, that's it right there. And my comment section yesterday was, love what I heard from Jalen Hurts. This sounds like a team that's united and stuff. Now, are they actually? I have absolutely no idea. I don't think anyone really knows the Sirianni-Hurts relationship. I know we got reports last year that it's not great. So my assumption is it's not that great. But I also have always wondered, is Jalen really that personable of a guy overall? And it's not a knock on Jalen Hurts at all, but he might not be the kind of buddy with everybody in the organization that we want our quarterback to be. And he might just not kind of like Sirianni on a personal level. Now, is that going to impact the play on the football field? I don't know. Is Jalen Hurts playing bad because he doesn't like Sirianni, or Sirianni doesn't like Hurts, or Sirianni's calling the plays or not? Again, I have no idea. But I liked what I heard from Jalen Hurts yesterday. And again, nobody talked about their relationship in 2022. And it's not like Jalen Hurts suddenly, was in love with Nick Sirianni in 2022 and then suddenly hated him last year. I'm sure he's always kind of been lukewarm. You always go back to that famous clip in the Super Bowl where Sirianni's, pointing first down and Hurts is putting his arm down and looking annoyed at him. So I don't think they've been best of friends at all throughout their career. But again, they just have to be close enough and on the same page to win football games. And if they start doing that, then all the Sirianni problems and question marks, I think, die down. Even his antics on the sideline, if they're blowing out teams, people aren't going to care. And that's kind of the main focus for me, is that they can start winning football games. No one's going to talk about Hurts and Sirianni's relationship, but if they keep losing, then I'm sure we'll be doing this each and every week.
Yeah, I mean, winning cures everything. But to your point, I mean, Jalen's been, Bob Lang and his staff coach up everybody. They've been telling them for years. So something else happened. And my thought, and it's just speculation, my thought is Jeffrey Lurie stepped in.
Maybe
said during the bye and said, look, I'm paying both you guys a lot of money. This is easy stuff. Yeah. This is easy stuff to say, go all the way back. The organization, and by the organization, I mean Jeffrey and Howie, were very upset the way Jalen left it at the end of minicamp. If you remember,
yes,
he stumbled and sort of couldn't even come up with anything.
Yeah.
And the organization looked at it as that's an unforced error. You got 6 weeks of open speculation that you just created and they were very upset by that. They should have been. And I think, not positive, but I think Jeffrey stepped in because one thing about Jalen Hurts, and for those of us who've been around him since he got here, we know him a little bit better than most people, but he's very intentional, keeps people at arm's length, and everything he does is with an intent. So he came out, and it was Ed Kratz, my colleague, who asked him the question, and it was a very very easy question, and he immediately brought up, it was intentional.
Yeah,
immediately bringing up Nick, and maybe that's something to do with Robert Saleh getting fired earlier. Because Jeffrey Lurie's looking at that and saying, "All right, you guys got to. I don't care if it's pretend or what. Act like you're on the same page." And I think it's a good thing, because this has not been 50-50 when people talk about the relationship. Nick Sirianni goes out of his way to defend Jalen Hurts, and it's not reciprocated.
Yeah.
It hasn't been to this point. I think the quarterback got taken to the principal's office.
Yeah, I mean, again, we will never know. And what does taking to the principal's office mean, right? It sounds like he's being scolded by Jeffrey Lurie, when in reality it could be, hey, listen, if we win on Monday or on Sunday, Jalen, we're sitting at 3-2. We can go, on a little roll here with the Giants and the Bengals and the Jaguars coming up. Just give me a little something on Sirianni. Make sure that the talking points on WIP or JAKIB Sports or the Thomas Mott Show this week isn't y'all's relationship. It's about the football game. And Jalen goes, I got you. Not a problem. Moves on, right? It probably was that. But overall, again, all it takes is one big win. And if they go out and win 31-10 against the Cleveland Browns and Jalen throws 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, he high-fives Sirianni, smiles whenever Sirianni gives him a fist bump coming off the football field, we're going to be so back in Philadelphia. It's going to be absolutely crazy. I mean, we are going to buy back into this football team. I think the fans will for sure. I know there'll be some people that won't.
That's Philly, Thomas. Yeah.
Philly will buy back in really quickly, and all of this goes to bed. So I do think Jalen has got to be, a little bit better in terms of the media and defending his coach and defending, his players. I've always seen him as just a guy that, kind of like Bill Belichick, you're going to get what you get, and that's just how he is. I don't really take any of it personally in terms of like he's dramatic, or he's just, being mean to the media guys and he doesn't want to talk to people. I just don't think just how he is. Like I met Jalen Hurts one time. He was the exact same way. I was very curious, right? It's like, okay, here's Jalen Hurts.
Oh yeah.
Is he going to be like different than what you see in the media? No, he's exactly the same guy. And you know what?
By the way, he's never been mean.
Never mean.
Any media person.
I agree.
Ever.
I agree.
Ever.
Yep.
Anybody
he's just
thinks
a little cold, I think.
Yeah, because sometimes he's sometimes he doesn't want to answer a question.
Yes.
He's very short, and people take that as he's being disrespectful to the questioner. He's not. And sometimes he'll go off camera and says, I don't want to answer that on the camera, and gives you an answer off the camera. He is not at all has a poor relationship with anybody, to my knowledge, who is there on a daily basis. But there is some unforced errors, and I'm not talking about on the field. There's those are bigger. The unforced errors on the field are a bigger deal, but there's some off the field that I think are pretty simple to button up. And I think that's why there was disappointment with Jeffrey and Howie dating back to, because it's simple. It's like, why are you doing this?
It is simple.
Just say, hey, he's doing a great job. Moved on to the next question. That's how easy.
Yeah.
That's how easy it is. So I think from that standpoint, they were upset, but you're 100% right, obviously. So now we'll get to the coach because of Robert Saleh. If it goes bad, that's been a narrative. I've said from the start, Tom, Jeffrey Lurie's not that guy.
Okay.
He doesn't want to be that guy. He's not firing Nick Sirianni in the regular season.
Sure.
Just not going to do it. If they go 0-4, does that change? And hey, I can't even picture that.
Yeah.
So, but this is what everybody brings up. Could he be fired? Is there any scenario Nick Sirianni could be fired in the regular season?
I think I'll go with what I said on my show strictly after the Bucs game, right? And I've, my Monday morning reaction show, and I think I said probably, quote, you like go back and find it. If they lose to the Browns, he will be fired. And whether that was a fan upset at what I saw in the Bucs game, whether I truly believe that, I'm starting to kind of lean off of it a little bit. But I think there is a scenario, right? If it's 41-10 or if it's 35-13, right? I mean, if they look absolutely horrible against the Cleveland Browns, I think it makes a massive. I think it does have an impact on Nick Sirianni, and mainly because, again, it is the Cleveland Browns. Like, we opened the show talking about how trap game this, and, technically Myles Garrett is really good, and technically they could lose. But any fan who's watched the Cleveland Browns over the first 5 weeks of the NFL season knows that if you lose badly to the Cleveland Browns, it's going to be ugly in Philadelphia. And while I agree, Jeffrey Lurie, he's not the kind of guy to go ahead and fire midseason. I just could maybe see it happening if it got ugly enough. I wouldn't say no. However, I think that it would take multiple losses in a row. I think if you were to lose to the Browns and then lose to the New York Giants and look bad doing that as well, obviously the Saquon Barkley aspect, the divisional aspect, that would kind of ramp things up. But we're talking what ifs here in terms of them losing back-to-back games against bad football.
Well, it's not going to happen.
I don't see it happening. But I do think Nick Sirianni is 100% on whatever hot seat you want to call it, whether it's scalding hot or lukewarm or just a little, car warmer hot, nice and mild there. But if they obviously struggle this season, he's going to be fired. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. If they have a disappointing year, he'll be fired at the end of the season. But I do think there is a 10, 12, 13% chance if it's really ugly on Sunday, like multiple turnovers, double digits, Deshaun Watson looks like Clemson, Deshaun Watson, then there'll at least be a conversation.
Oh, God. That would be the most Philly thing ever.
I can't imagine if that happens.
2021. I don't either.
Holy
the guy,
hell.
I mean, we had Sal Palantonio on last night on our night show, and he's like, Amari Cooper was running completely free last week, and Deshaun Watson just overthrows him by 10 yards, 12 yards. I mean, he's just not playing good football right now. So I think Watson has lost it in a way, and I also am not sure how much. He doesn't seem like he's dedicated to the game and improving his craft. Now, maybe I'm wrong on that, but we'll see what he's able to do. Thomas, let's get your prediction on the game, man, coming into this weekend. What are you thinking? What are you leaning? Eagles big win. What's your prediction coming into this weekend?
Exactly what I did on my live show with Josh on Wednesday night. It's Eagles by 10. I think I want to say I said, oh man, 27-17 was the number that I went with. I see double digits. I think if it's not double digits and it's a close win, fans are still going to be very, very upset. I think they need to go out and win by 10, 14, 17. This needs to be a nice, comfortable win. And all we got to do is make sure we don't have a recreation of the Arizona Cardinals game last year, because that was a game where we all said, oh my gosh, they're at home. They're obviously going to win this game. The Cardinals are, and then Kyler looked fantastic, right? It was like still kind of slightly injured Kyler with no weapons on the outside, and he dominated our defense. And all of us were like, okay, this season's officially over. Close the book on it. We're going to have, serious problems the rest of the way. And we did, right? So as long as we don't have a letdown like that, they get this big win. off the bye, double digits. And then you guys mentioned it, the next 4 weeks, it's pretty simple. If they can just put together a little span here and get to that Dallas game sitting at what? Maybe 4-2, I believe, with the calculations. I mean, anything's possible. So go on a run here. Let's get rolling. And I think they win by at least 10. I'll go 27-17, but I'm hoping they score 30 tomorrow or on Sunday.
I like 27-17. That's a good score.
At Real Thomas Mott, let me give you this, and make sure you watch Thomas. Tremendous show, does a great job on YouTube himself. You can watch his show. When's your next one, by the way?
Probably tomorrow morning. I got to decide. We got to kind of wait and see what news happens today in terms of which Browns players are going to play or not, but probably tomorrow morning.
Yeah, that is a long injury report. So get ready for that. But what if it's a win, but a win by the skin of their teeth type game? How are you feeling coming out of that type of scenario?
Yeah, I mean, if Jalen throws an interception, gets strip sacked, the defense gets worked on a couple of drives, and they win 21-20, I think a lot of fans are going to start checking out, guys. And the content creator in me kind of monitors these things because there is an ebb and flow. I'm sure you guys see this too in terms of people that check in after a big win. They love it. They're pumped. And then people that check in after a big loss, a lot less people do. And you saw that with the Bucs game. And so from that perspective, you're just hoping for a win. But from a fan perspective, I too am going to start to really not buy into this football team. I mean, the entire show here, I think I've kept saying like, well, just get a win, get rolling. The roster's good. It'll all be fine. But if it's skin of their teeth, John, I think most of us are going to be like, okay, this is not going to happen. And we'll still try and convince ourselves, beat the Giants, then you're, 500 and NFC, but this has got to be a big win. I think it just has to be a clean win. Maybe they only win, 20-14 and kind of a lower scoring matchup, but it's a clean win. They have a couple of nice drives, a couple of sacks. They turn over the football in terms of picking off Deshaun Watson. Like, we can work with these things. But if it's 21-20, they kick a game-winning field goal, Hurts has multiple turnovers, the defense gets worked with no sacks and no picks of Deshaun Watson, then I think a lot of us are going to start to kind of check out on the idea that this is a playoff football team.
Yeah, I think the way they do it, if it's close, is what matters the most. I'm okay with it being close because we saw last year what playing your best football in September and October does, right? Like, I want to play our best football after Thanksgiving. The old Tom Brady quote, football starts after Thanksgiving.
Right.
I mean, so if they can just play cleaner football, as you mentioned, and kind of ramp up later in the year or start to find their rhythm through each week, I'd be good with that. But you're right, if they have a bunch of turnovers and that, it's going to be ugly. Thomas, thanks for joining the show today, man. Make sure you guys go check out his YouTube channel, one of the best on YouTube, covering this team at the Thomas Mott Show. So go check him out. Follow him on Twitter at Real Thomas Mott. Thomas, thanks, man. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Thomas.
Good stuff from Thomas Mott there on Birds 365.